I want to begin today by teaching you a Greek word. Okay, it's one Greek word. Now, let me be clear on why I don't want to teach you, okay? Let me give you the reasons we're not learning this Greek word, okay? I'm not teaching this Greek word so that, I can show off my great Greek acumen. This is about the only Greek word I know, and I learned it in the last couple weeks, okay? I'm not a Greek expert. We're not playing that card or anything like that, okay? I'm not teaching you this Greek word so that you can go home today and say, man, I am deep. I know a Greek word. Okay, I promise you that this Greek word, when you learn this Greek word, it's not somehow magically going to make you feel more spiritual. Okay, it's not deeper or anything else. It's just a Greek word, and the reason I want to teach you the Greek word really is because it is kind of a simple word. It's a little bit of a fun word, and I actually think it will help us lock in a little bit on this encounter with Jesus we're going to look at today. Because this word, this Greek word that I want to teach you is very central. In fact, it describes a major part of the encounter we're going to look at. And here's the goal. Everything we can do to help ourselves understand the encounters that we're reading about with Jesus and the story of God in Scriptures helps us. Because whenever we see an encounter in the Scriptures, a couple things happen. Number one, we learn something new about Jesus. And we learn something new about ourselves and who we can be with Jesus. The same thing happens today when you have an encounter with Jesus. Maybe you've already this morning had an encounter with Jesus. Maybe last night you had an encounter with Jesus, right? Whenever you have an encounter with Jesus, a couple of things happen. One, you get to learn a little bit more about Jesus, and you get to learn a little bit more about yourself and who you can be with Jesus. Okay, so let's learn Greek. You ready? Let's learn Greek. Let's do some foreign language expertise, all right? The Greek word I want to teach you today, very simply, is the word lilapse. Lilapse. I mean, it sounds a little bit like lilacs for those of you who like to plant things, okay? But it's lilapse, okay? Get a P on the end of that thing. Lilapse. Just lilapse. It's that simple. This is so easy that you're going to be able to throw this into lunchtime conversation with your waiter or waitress this afternoon and sound smart, even though they have no idea what you're talking about, right? Okay. Lilapse. So just to work on it, okay, let's say this thing together. On the count of three, just say it. Lilapse. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. That's good. Let's go one more time. Even at home, we want to even be able to hear you, back through the monitor, okay? So here we go. Lilapse. 1, 2, 3. Look at you, fluent in Greek. I can feel it, okay? I can feel it right now. Lilapse, real simple word. Lilapse simply means a sudden squall, like a sudden storm that seems to emerge literally out of nowhere. So we're not really talking about like a West Michigan thunderstorm that we can see rolling across the lake and we can kind of get prepared for, right? It seemingly comes out of nowhere. It's a sudden squall, a sudden storm. And key to making it a lilapse is it's violent. It's got unrelenting gust of wind. It's got waves just pouring against out on the water, right? A lilapse always seems to happen around water. And if you're in a boat, it's pushing water over the side of the boat all of the time, right? It's a lilapse. It sends everything topsy-turvy. If you were ever on the water in a lilapse, it would be the one it caught you. You look grabbing for something. Like, how can I hang on? Right? You hear stories about cruise ships. People are on cruise ships and a storm happens or there's some massive undercurrent happening. And what do they start doing? They start latching down chairs on the deck, right? Like anchor these things down, right? That's what you would do in a lilapse. You try and grab a hold of something to give yourself some point of security. That's what happens in a lilapse. This sudden squall and storm. And it's significant to the story of Jesus and some of his followers we're going to engage with a little bit today. And it's significant for you and me because here's the deal even before we read the story. You already know that just in your life, lilapse happen. You have storms. And some of them are very, very unexpected. Right, it's one call. It's when a doctor leaves a message in your voicemail that sounds urgent and you thought it was nothing and you didn't anticipate even getting a call. And now just in one message, you're left with what feels like a a sudden storm, this Lilapse. It's when two things you love come crashing together, vying for your time, and you're forced to make decisions that you never wanted to have to make. And suddenly it feels like through no choice or fault of your own, you're in the middle of a Lilapse. You're stuck in the storm. It's the one piece of information that informs you about a tragedy or a trauma. It's the one day in the job when HR calls you and tells you they want to meet on Friday afternoon. And you know, right? You know, Lilapse. And we all have them. Nobody's immune. You may not be in one right now, but you will be one day. And maybe you don't feel like you're in one now. Maybe you just say, well, the world's in one, so I guess I am. We're all kind of in one together, yes? This Lilapse, this sudden storm. With that idea in mind, that little Greek word and that picture painted in mind, I want to invite you to turn to a passage of Scripture, Mark chapter 4. Mark chapter 4, New Testament in your Bible, and maybe you'll scroll there or something. A fascinating little encounter with the disciples and Jesus that's a real window into us and Jesus. And while you're turning there, the portion we're going to read, let me tell you what's happening. It's festival time for the Jewish people. And so Jesus is around during his time on earth, and he's engaging in the festival, and he's actually been doing some teaching. Everybody's been hanging around the tabernacles, right? Everybody's been going to church, okay? And Jesus has been doing some teaching, okay? And so when we pick up the story, it's towards the end of the day, and the disciples have been in church listening to Jesus teach, which, it was probably solid, okay? It was Jesus, right? It was probably really good teaching. Unlike you get a lot of times here. It was good, okay? And they're like leaving, they leave church, and you know they're talking about it because every time Jesus talked, people are like, man, he's got such strength with his words, and he's got authority, and he just talks like nobody's ever talked to us before. This is incredible, right? So these guys are in a really good place. And they're walking out, and they're talking about it, and we're going to pick up the story right there. At the end of a day of this festival living, of bouncing around in the church, and Jesus being the primary teacher, this is what we pick up. Mark chapter 4, we're going to start in verse 35. It's at the end of that day, when evening came, that's Jesus, he said to his disciples, hey, let's go over to the other side of this lake. So much in the New Testament happens around bodies of water. Let's go to the other side of this lake. Leaving the crowd behind, the disciples of Jesus, the 12 closest to him in this moment, they took Jesus along just as he was in the boat. Now, there were some other boats also with him. Verse 37, a furious squall, Lilapse. Out of nowhere, while they're trying to get to the other side, a raging storm, unrelenting wind, crashing waves, topsy-turvy, Lilapse came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped, and they couldn't empty the buckets back over the side fast enough. And in verse 38, while this was happening, Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion, which was probably nothing more than a sandbag. So you got to see it a little bit, okay? These guys are working like crazy to try and keep the boat afloat. And Jesus is at a minimum dreaming and maybe snoring. He's out. No response. Everybody else is trying to hang on, and Jesus is out. He's just sleeping. The disciples, they eventually get up the courage, and they wake him up, and they said, teacher, church was good, man. Your teaching was great, but do you not care that we're going to drown? Like, you got to get up and do something. Verse 39, he got up, he rebuked the wind, he said to the waves, quiet, be still. And then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. 2 statements, 3 words, completely calm. 2 statements, 3 words. Storm's done. Just that quick. Verse 40, he looked at his disciples. A little bit of a grin on his face, probably said, why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? Maybe better, and some of you are actually looking at a translation and say, where is your faith? This little encounter that Jesus and the disciples have in the middle of this Lilapse, this sudden storm. Right? For them in this moment, at least initially, it's a circumstantial storm. It's a weather storm. And it is out of control in a hurry. But in these handful of sentences that Mark gives us, we get to see a few things about Jesus. And I want to share these with you. And right off the bat, it's going to create just a little bit of tension in our soul to try and wrestle this to the ground and come to grips with something that's true, but something that can help us so much when we see it. Here's the first reality about a Lilapse with Jesus, and it's simply this, that Jesus sometimes actually leads us into the storm. Sometimes the storm in our life is because Jesus actually led us there. Who said get in the boat? That was Jesus. Who said let's go to the other side? That was Jesus. Can't blame it on anybody else. Can't look at Peter, one of the disciples. It's your fault again, dude. It's Jesus. Hey, let's go to the other side. It's been a long day. We've done a lot of teaching. Let's go to the other side. Jesus says, get in the boat. Jesus leads them into a storm. Which means this, that while a lot of times we want to judge whether or not we are in God's will based on what the condition of a storm is in our life. Hey, if we're inside the storm, man, we must have somehow missed God and we must have done something wrong. We must have missed it. Or we're inside the storm. It must mean we're inside God's will. This has got to be it because it's hard, right? It's got to be it. Neither one of those is really true. A storm is not the primary determining factor about whether or not we are inside the will of Jesus. The primary determining factor about whether or not we are inside the will of Jesus is, did we do what Jesus said? Right? Did we do what Jesus said? That's the mark of God's will, but the storm can sometimes be something that Jesus leads us into. And even when he doesn't lead us into it, you got to understand, you got to let this soak deep in your soul. Even when Jesus doesn't lead us into a storm, there's never been a storm in your life that Jesus, in his bigness and in his knowledge and his understanding, didn't allow to come. You see, but why would Jesus do that? Like, why would Jesus lead us into a storm? There's always couple reasons. It could be one of these two reasons. It could be both of these reasons. But Jesus sometimes sends us into the storm, sometimes sends us into the Lilapse he sees coming and we don't, for one or a couple reasons. Number one, it's to develop our gifts. Number two, to deepen our faith. Or it could be both of them, right? It's to develop our gifts. It's to push us a little bit, to invite us to develop a little more confidence and assuredness and expression of gifts that he's given us through his Spirit. Gifts like hospitality, or gifts like kindness, or gifts like mercy, or gifts like leadership or teaching, right? He's saying, okay, like now we're in this, now we're in something challenging you've never been in before. Let's develop those gifts that I've given you. Or it could be to deepen your faith. It could be to deepen the reliance, which in this case is largely what Jesus is doing to the disciples, which is why later he has a conversation with them about their faith. He's trying to deepen and anchor in the faith a little bit for them. He's not just trying to increase their knowledge. He's not trying to teach them new Greek words to make them smarter and deeper, but he is trying to deepen their faith and their reliance on him. And it's with that in mind that he says, hey, let's get in the boat and let's go to the other side, knowing that a Lilapse is coming. When we begin to see this, this is when we start to become a little more okay with like stormy times of chaos and like disorder. It's why James, the half-brother of Jesus, like later in the New Testament Bible, will write this really audacious phrase when he says, hey, we should consider it like all joy. Like we should actually celebrate whenever we face trials and struggles and Lilapses of many kinds. We should consider that like a great thrill. And it's not because we're excited about the storm itself. It's not like he's saying, hey, celebrate the fact that you might drown on this boat right now. He's saying, no, celebrate that the Jesus you're with refuses to let anything be wasted, including this storm. Celebrate the good that's happening. Celebrate the development in your life that's happening. Listen. Jesus' intention, and this is because of his goodness, and sometimes I think we hear it and we think, oh, Jesus is so mean. Jesus, in his goodness, his aim is never to just get you through a storm. Jesus' aim is to get you through a storm in a way that allows you to grab a whole bunch of plunder while you're going through it. So you come out of it with more than you went into it with. Who wants to survive a storm and be the same? So Jesus says, look, sometimes I send you into the Lilapse, but it's to develop these gifts or to deepen this faith. And Jesus is excited about that and has it within him to be both compassionate and developing at the same time, which is really good, right? Sometimes Jesus sends us into the storm. Sometimes Jesus sends us into, not every time, but sometimes the storm you find yourself in. Is Jesus in all of his wisdom and all of his love walking you into something that will be for your development or your deepening. And when you're in it, much like the disciples were in it in their moment, it's part of what we begin to realize is that in the middle of this storm, my faith has a direction. Faith always has a direction. Faith is pointed somewhere. Faith has an object or a person on which it is fixed. The disciples have a circumstantial storm, right? It's a weather storm, okay? But they very, very quickly have an emotional storm. When they go wake Jesus up, hey, teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown? I mean, just step into their soaking wet sandals for a minute and understand they're going into the stern of the boat to wake up the guy they've heard amazing teaching from and who they have a growing conviction actually loves them. When they wake him up to ask him what he's going to do about the storm, it is not just a question anymore about the storm. It is now also a question about, wait, do you really love us? The question, do you care that we're drowning, is the words that express, do you really love us? Which is full of emotion, full of heart wonder, maybe heart confusion. Do you really love us? And Jesus gets up, and in 2 statements, 3 words, he calms this whole thing. And he looks at them, not with any condemnation, no anger, but he looks at them with all this compassion, this hope, and kind of sees this moment look in his eyes and says, where's your faith? Where's your faith? And he's not asking hey, whoa, go look for it somewhere. I think you left your faith in the front of the boat. He's asking, where is your faith pointed? Which direction is your faith pointed? See, here's the thing. Let's just have an honest conversation. I know we're in church, but let's just have a candid moment, okay? It's really easy in this environment. I could take a little poll and say, hey, how many of you, your faith is in Jesus? And you'd all raise your hand because you're in church. Or, there'd be a few really honest ones of you. I'm not sure, but right? Most of us, I'm in church, I'm probably supposed to. Jesus, right? Right? Okay. But what if we were honest enough to just say, you know what? When a storm comes, when the Lilapse hits, sometimes it's really easy to start to actually put our faith in the Lilapse, to actually think the Lilapse is a little stronger than our Jesus, or that the Lilapse is more likely to happen. The Lilapse is more likely to drown us than Jesus is to save us. The Lilapse is more likely to beat us than Jesus is to rescue us. Right? It's a very subtle shift. And for many of us, it doesn't happen on day one of the Lilapse. It happens on day 420 of the Lilapse. It's been a gradual wearing down. We moved our faith. We moved our faith a millimeter a day. And it started on Jesus. But now, what or who is the object of your faith? Are you most confident? Who are you most reliant in? Who or what are you most leaning your life on? Jesus is saying, where's your faith? Who or what are you counting on to win this day? Me or this Lilapse? Where's your faith? It's a great question for us today, right? Maybe you're not in the middle of your own Lilapse. I mean, maybe your life is in a season of peace and calm and Mary by the door. That's amazing, right? Keep it as long as you can. But again, even our world, it's in a lot of turmoil, right? We could name about 100 different Lilapse happening in our world right now. And part of the encounter with Jesus is to just pause for a minute in the middle of that Lilapse and ask, where's my faith? Am I more confident and expectant in the long-term goodness of Jesus and his kingdom, or am I more confident and expectant that I can't be helped, or we can't be helped, or there's no way forward? Which direction is your faith pointed in? After Jesus has this very emotional conversation with these guys. I want to just read you the last little verse of this account. Maybe you still got your Bible open. You've been taking notes in the margin up. And here's what it says. They were terrified. They were very afraid. It's funny. When we started the story and there was a storm, they were afraid. Jesus has calmed the storm. And 2 statements, 3 words. He's calmed it. And now they're more afraid they were than when the storm was raging. The water is calm, the wind has stopped, the boat is steady, and the disciples are more afraid than they were when the boat was in complete chaos. It's interesting. They were terrified, and they asked each other, because they don't have the courage yet to ask Jesus, who is this guy? Even the winds and the wave obey him. I mean, in the first century, the one thing that people thought that only the gods could control was nature and the wind and the waves, right? And now all of a sudden, they've literally seen it with their own eyes. They've seen this guy who they were just in church with, earlier that day. He's now stood up. And 2 phrases, 3 words, calmed a storm in the middle of a sea. And they're like, who is this guy? What? Wait, what? So up until this point, the disciples in the early going with Jesus, they were pretty convinced Jesus is manageable. What you got to understand in this moment is that the disciples had plans for Jesus. The disciples had plans for Jesus and how he might actually be the one who could overthrow a Roman government, how he could set things right, how he could get rid of an oppressor, how he could, right? They had plans for Jesus. In their mind, Jesus was great and gifted and talented, but he was manageable. And what we see in this last little bit of who is this guy, what they're having to come to grips with, and this is really helpful for us when we have encounters with Jesus, what they're coming to grips with is that Jesus is completely unmanageable. Jesus is not manageable. Jesus can't be coerced or manipulated. Jesus will not be treated like a vending machine or a string puppet of some kind. Jesus is not manageable. Who is this guy? I mean, even the wind and the waves obey him. And listen, here's why this is such good news. These guys had a storm, a Lilapse they could not manage and could not control. They need a Jesus they can't manage and control to beat a storm they can't manage and can't control. I don't know what your Lilapse is, but I can tell you need a Jesus bigger than your Lilapse. And if you can't manage your Lilapse, why do you want a Jesus you can try and manage and control? who is this that even my Lilapse would obey him? Who is that guy? It's not manageable, which means this, that he's also not very guaranteed to be what we would call safe. We've got all sorts of weird, distorted definitions of safe right now in our culture, but he's also not guaranteed to be safe. He led them into the Lilapse. He led them into this point of great dependence. Showed them he was bigger than their storm, but showed them at the same time, he's not manageable. He's the leader. It reminds me of this line, the Chronicles of Narnia, written by a Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, written by C.S. Lewis, where he writes this, when there's this conversation about Aslan, the lion coming, this depiction of Jesus, right? There's this conversation about, hey, is he safe? And the answer is, hey, who said anything about safe? Of course he's not safe, but he's good. He's good. And sometimes we think good and safe are synonymous. Not necessarily. It's so important. Look, it's so important for these disciples because they will follow Jesus into many unsafe environments. In fact, almost all of them, probably all but one of them, will end up being significantly persecuted and actually killed simply for their faith in Jesus. That's not safe. But he's good. But he's good. The world may not feel completely safe to you right now. And it's possible the world may get less safe for you. But what if even in the middle of that, what if Jesus is good? What if in the middle of dangerous? What if in the middle of uncertain? What if in the middle of your Lilapse, you could have a not fully manageable Jesus who's bigger than your Lilapse and is good? Let me leave you with a couple of things just to ponder it, just to weigh it out maybe over the course of the next few days. First one's just real simply this. What's your storm? What's your storm? What are you facing right now? What's the Lilapse? And again, maybe it's very personal. Maybe it's your family, a friend group. Maybe it's maybe you feel very much a part of a Lilapse that's happening in the world right now. Maybe you've got multiple Lilapses. Yours might be plural. What are your storms? Right? What are your storms? And look, don't downplay it. If it feels like a Lilapse to you, it's probably a Lilapse. Where's your faith? Which direction is it pointed? We all have faith in something. We have all placed our hope and our confidence. We are all counting on something to happen, whether it's good or bad. We might be more confident the bad is going to happen right now. But where is your faith? And would today be a day you would choose to point it in the direction of Jesus, or maybe to recalibrate it back into the direction of Jesus? Where's your faith? And very connected to that is, how big is your Jesus? Maybe it's time for some of us to have an encounter with Jesus that causes us to say, who in the world is that? I thought I knew everything there was to know about this Jesus. Who's that? Because whoever that Jesus, I want more of that Jesus. I'm going to put even more trust in that Jesus. Who is that? What might Jesus want to do in your life even today, even before you go to sleep tonight, that would cause you to say, who is that? I mean, I knew that in my head maybe. I had a piece of logic that maybe knew some fact about Jesus, but now I'm experiencing it in my life. And in the mere experience of it, I say, who is that? Who is that could free me and unshackle me and unchain me? Who is that could heal me and restore me and make me right? Who is that could give me a hope and a future? Who is that will give me a voice and an assurance that I'm loved and accepted and I'm chosen by him? Who is that would love me in spite of me? Who is that? Who is that would make a way forward for me somehow? Who is that would see me through a storm, but make me better through the storm and bring me out of a storm with more than I went into the storm? Who would do that? Who could do that? Who is that? How big is your Jesus? And could he get even the smallest bit bigger in your heart and soul today? What's your storm or your storms? Where's your faith? How big is your Jesus? We all experience the Lilapse of life. What's yours? Where's your faith? How big is your Jesus? Let's talk to him about it just for a minute. Jesus, thanks for your candor. I often think how you are Jesus. I mean, you're the one. You could have painted a real false picture for us and taken all the stories like this out of the Bible, and yet somehow you chose to protect them in your scriptures, in this thing called the canon of the scriptures. And all your wisdom, you chose to protect even the stories that might ruffle us a little bit, to think that you would lead us sometimes to follow you into the challenging, into the Lilapse. But all because you want to reveal more of your goodness. You want to reveal more of who we were made to be with you. A little later, these same disciples are going to exercise some of their power connection with you to quiet things, to free people, to heal people. You were doing a good thing in them. They didn't get to the other side of the lake the same. I'm grateful for your honesty in that, and how in every story we see your hope and your love for us. God, for every one of us right now that's sitting in the middle of a Lilapse, if nothing else, today would you encourage, would you remind of your presence, would you remind us that you're fully aware, that you're fully engaged, and that you are bigger than whatever that Lilapse is. Would you forgive us for every place we've tried to manage you or coerce you or be the controller of you and try and be in charge of it, or even where we felt like we had to be that. Would you forgive us of that and just really give us a permission and a freedom to live without that weight, but to live with you is bigger than the storm that seems to be raging around us or in us. Our faith is in you. We do choose that today, Jesus. It's not necessarily a thing we feel all the time, but we choose because of your constant goodness to us, because of the lengths you would go to be with us. We choose to have our faith and our reliance in you and your goodness and your strength.